I'll open the meeting. Welcome those present. It's good to see some people here tonight. And advise that the meeting will be recorded in accordance with Council policy titled Electronic Recording of Council Meetings policy. To assist in the preparation of minutes and ensure a true and accurate account of debate and discussion at meetings is available. We'll now be upstanding for prayers. Prayers tonight will be by Father Chris from the church and also the Lord's Prayer. Thank you.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. So we pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for every seat that has been filled here tonight, for each mind and heart that feels the presence of this room. We thank you. In our hearts, we plan our course, but we pray that you establish our steps. We pray that we seek you for advice. Only you truly know what we are setting out to accomplish tonight. We have ideas, visions, hints, and daily instructions. We have talents, abilities, and time to work. However, only you can see in perfect detail the end of every beginning, every project, every season, every life. Nothing is ever in vain, for even mistakes and missteps are used for good. Give us the desire to find ways to excel in our work. Help us to work together and encourage each other to excellence. We ask that we would challenge each other to reach higher and farther to be the best we can be. Let us not make decisions based upon what we know, but let us act based upon your wisdom. Please guide us, Lord. Let our actions in this meeting be valuable to our aim, which is to build up and edify one another. We place this meeting in your hands. We place our hearts and our minds in your hands, so that you may direct us. We ask this in the name of Jesus our Lord. Amen. Together we say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Thank you. Luke, Beth and Snell, there's no apologies because we're all here. Confirmation of minutes of previous meeting held on the 18th. Is somebody prepared to move those? So we just need Councillor Rowley, second Councillor Kay. I'll put the motion, all those in favour. Aye. Against, carried. 3 issues raised by councillors, 3-1 now, 3-2, 3-3, we've got 2 responses there. Go on to 3-4, council questions without notice. Are there any council questions without notice? Councillor Kay.
Yes, Mr Mayor. I'd like to know, through you, Mr Mayor, to Mr Riley, our General Manager, is there an update on the dog catcher and the problems that we're having in the district?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I had a conversation today with the Director of Engineering and Infrastructure and the Manager of Planning and Regulatory Services. We hope to have a briefing paper back to Council very shortly, probably within weeks, in relation to those service levels, allowing Council to make some decisions around outcomes in relation to those service expectations that the community has raised.
If you want
Yes,
to
thank you. I'd just like to say I have a formal letter and I have misplaced and brought the wrong letter tonight, but I will forward that on to Council to be put into the next lot of Council minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Rice-Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 3 questions. The Tasmanian State budget in 2018-19 allocated $100,000 for feasibility study in the Western Explorer, or the Roads Nowhere as some may call it. Have we received the feasibility study for the Western Explorer?
No, we haven't. I'm told that it's on the Minister's desk, and obviously now that won't be see the light of day till after the election, obviously.
So that clarifies the second question. I said I received information in January by several MPs that it was on the Minister's desk, so when it will be received is then. Considering the state's record spend on infrastructure in the current budget, $5 million, what are the municipalities' infrastructure priorities?
Ours,
Ours.
the list that we sent to all politicians, or not only politicians, but those.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have the regional ones that are associated to the Cradle Coast, but in relation to our core infrastructure priorities, what at the local level would be based upon our 10-year long-term asset management plan, and aligning funding opportunities with that would be some of the key things we could work on.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, where would the mental health specialists be based in Circular Head? Would they be Rural Health, Chatham and Durham, and would they be living in Circular Head pending if the Leagues are successful with their promise of $300,000 over 3 years for funding for local mental health?
The Deputy Premier has stated that if Liberals are elected, there will be a roundtable conference of somebody from Windara, from Council, from Rural Health and from Chat, and we need to work with the Deputy Premier, who's also the Mental Health Minister, to work out what is best for the community. So that'll be up to that group to work that out. It'll be hopefully somebody who lives in our district, which would be quite obviously, that would be what we hope, but depending on where they come from and who we get, and we've got to work out exactly what we want as well. So that will be, we won't know until after the election, and after that group moves, and this council will have input into it as well.
Thank you.
I've got a question which flows on from that, and I was going to bring it up with the PESRAC report, but one of the 5 recommendations of that PESRAC report, one of the strong themes was to tackle mental health from a community level, and it came across really clear that that's something that the state government will be referencing. And my question is, will Council's role in coordinating these or these services or this funding change? And if it does, will the community as ratepayers be happy for their resources to be spent on that role extension? Or if Council's role is to change, how do we get that mandate from community and be sure that that's what they want us to do?
Well, I believe it's something that we need as a council to have a discussion after the election. Before anything happens, we need to have a pretty good discussion with that. So we're well aware of what council responsibility and what we as a council wants, on behalf of our community, and I think we need to have discussions with these other three groups as well, so that we get whatever is best for our community, because we don't want to just spend the 300,000 over the 3 years for no good reason. We need to make sure that it's what our community wants, and that's primarily for young people, because that's the discussions that took place on the 23rd of December, where this was started. This is where the whole discussion started. And so, and I know that the Liberal government, if they do get in, are looking at revamping the mental health side at Burnie as well, because that's part of the problem as well. For locally, it's more the person that's going to be employed to be able to work with these people that are having this problem. So it's going to be a little while before we get that level yet. So we will have the opportunity to have a discussion with them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because it's a new role, it's a new challenge for society.
It is.
And it's something that we're all seeing, we're all learning at the same time, you know, just specifically how our role is defined.
Yeah, and I'm not sure of that yet, but we need to talk about it for sure. Any further questions for our notes? If not, we'll go to declaration of general interest, and I obviously have one for 7.2. Declare that now.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to declare that I have pecuniary interest in the point 10.1.
So that'll be a
Planning.
yep, so pecuniary interest. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Non-pecuniary.
Non-pecuniary. Thank you.
I also have them doing in 18.2, please.
18.2, non-pecuniary. Yep. Thank you. Now I need a motion to for items 5, 6 and 7. And you've got the recommendation there. Is somebody prepared to move that? Thanks, Councillor Rylager. Second, Councillor Blizzard. I wouldn't expect any discussion on that. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Aye. Against, carried. Now going to 5, which is council workshops. Are there any questions on any of those, councillors? Councillor Edlund?
So there's 2 items on the 13th and 20th of March, and the special strategic plan review workshop, that's quite clear, but the second item there, I wasn't sure how much time we spent on it.
We did talk about the community fund. I can't remember, was it the first one or the second one? We didn't spend a lot of time on it, but we did spend some time on it. I do remember that.
Just that one there and the last one, I didn't think they occurred, so I just thought I'd point out. Didn't actually happen.
Oh, okay. Yep, no, that did, I remember we discussed it, but it wasn't much discussion. 6, the mayor's appointments. Is anything on that? Councillor Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Point 8 in communications, private house representatives meeting. What was the outcome in the discussions about where we're going with, where Tasmanian's going, or where they're going with us?
We had that discussion, we put it on the agenda as we were asked to, and there was only one person that basically supported us, was the Deputy Mayor of Devonport, and the others said, and they felt that if we're going to go any further, we'd need to do it at the water reps when we have a meeting with them, the statewide meeting, but there wasn't any support from anybody other than the Deputy Mayor. We felt that there'd be probably 2 or 3 would have supported us, but they didn't.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I find that disappointing from coastal mayors and deputy mayors at that meeting. That wouldn't support us. Anyway, we have to take another attack. The other meeting, had a meeting with Minister Hinch, and also I said we had a meeting with Senator Jackie Lambie in relevance about And the third one there, you might touch on is the Minister, meeting with Angus Taylor, the federal minister.
Okay. First one was with, and they all were just general meetings. Minister Gents was coming down for another final meeting, so he came a bit earlier. The main thing we got out of that was the fact that they have got a quote for 25,000 for Fine Trot Road, and they're waiting to get some funding. And obviously now that's not going to happen until the next budget, and so hopefully that will be part of the budget when it comes out. But it's disappointing to say he did say that he was going to do it, and I suspect that there would be an issue with budget to get it done then, but that's obviously wasn't the case. The one with Jackie Lambie was just a general catch-up again. Just trying to think of what all the things we spoke to her about. Well, there were a lot of federal stuff.
Through you, Mr Mayor, one of the discussion items with Senator Jackie Lambie was her approach and her efforts in relation to the Royal Commission for
Veterans
Affairs,
Affairs,
yes.
that's right, it was too.
Yeah, she updated us in relation to that and was hopeful that something would be announced and respectfully announced, which is.
And the last one was with the Minister for, Federal Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction, Minister Angus Taylor. That was, came to Burnie and there was about 30 people there, which was quite a good meeting, where he updated us on their readiness for battery elimination for Tasmania. Marinus was talked about, and we did talk to him about the fact that our community, which is affected with this, hasn't been, in our opinion, hasn't been talked about enough in the community. So we get talked about it often as councillors, but yet the federal government and state government hasn't come out and talked to the community. So to bring them up to date where they believe, well, the position that they're going with, they're not letting anybody know, which was disappointing. So they promised that they would update that, but we haven't seen any efforts in that at this point in time. Fair bit of discussion, but whether much more comes out of it or not, I don't know.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that discussion in terms of meeting with Angus Taylor, I must admit, there are certainly the only local government representatives that were in that conversation. So there was a tremendous opportunity to reinforce some of the concerns that the community has, particularly in relation to some of the strategic things that state are doing, and particularly around what that infrastructure needs and the impacts. I know myself, I raised with a number of the parties that I spoke to some of the challenges we have around housing, making sure that, as our industry and sectors continue to flourish and grow, essentially we've got all sections of our community covered in relation to housing. So it was surprising that there was only the Mayor and myself there in relation to representing local government. And, for example, Dale Elphinstone was in the room. There's also a number of people there that were quite significant in terms of the Northwest investment or commitment to some of those new and emerging industries.
Thank you. Anything further?
I've just got a question with the meeting with Telstra. Was that something to do with black spots or?
Yes,
How did that go?
yeah, that went fairly well. So they were asking us to put forward what we want, and Gavin Pearce is there as well, and so he did say that there is funding for some of these black spots, and so it's just a matter of whether we can get some, and they talked about pretty well the ones that we have spoken to, whether it be Warnock, Martha River, Tagari, Forest, Lower Scotchdown Road, earlier to back to Mulbana turn-off and back to Mulbana as well. So Scott then the GM of Wynyard will be putting joint submission in, and so hopefully we'll get some fun out of it. So it was actually quite positive, the meeting we had.
Mr. Mayor, I wasn't at the Morbanna fire station meeting. I'm just wondering if you could probably share with us the positive result that came out of that, please?
Yeah, no, that was actually a really good meeting. There was a number of people there, and the fire chief actually talked about the fact that they do need to, they would put another fire vehicle back in Morbanna if they had enough people to operate it, but they needed about, I think it was 8 was the number that they, was the minimum that they would need to be able to, for that to happen. And so if there was 8 registered in Morbanna, they would do that. Now if they don't get 8, they would need to use a vehicle from either Monchamana or Helier and join with them. And, but there was a fair bit of positiveness with it, and I'm not sure how many. I know that some people had checked out on it and thought it was too difficult for them, and so didn't want it. But there was a number there, and I suspect that they probably will get the rate, and the vehicle won't come back immediately, but when there's one available, they will work on it should they get their 8 people. And they've got to finish their basic training before they can be members for that to happen. Yeah, that was pretty well where it finished up. And so it's really back to the people of Morbanna to make sure that they get enough people to do the course, the basic course, to be able to get registered. Anything further? If not, we'll move to 7, and 7.1 is the local agenda item.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Late agenda item 7.1. Council is normally consider at this time of year some draft motions for consideration by the GAP for the annual general meeting, which is normally held in July.
Oh, do we need a motion to accept that?
Yes,
We
please.
probably do, sorry.
So moved.
Thanks. Councillor Ollivaker and Councillor Radley, I'll put the motion to all those in favour.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you.
Back to you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. In relation to the recommendations that are there, I have formulated those based upon the discussions that we've had around the table. Just quickly, the one in relation to number 1, probably the reason I put it at the top of the list is that if council was able to secure a better percentage in terms of the heavy vehicle motor tax funding that's collected by the state, there would be considerably less pressure on our ratepayers to sustain our road network. So I've come back with an alternative strategy in relation to looking at a 3-year phase in, whether that's more palatable to a new government post-election, we will wait and see. But in relation to other activities there, we've got integrated regional housing supply strategy. As number 2, comprehensive review of the regional, state regional land use strategies. There are 3 in the state. Number 4, on behalf of all council, for the early completion of the coastal hazards management and existing settlements values project. That's primarily around coastal erosion and some of the impacts there. We've been waiting for that report for a period of time. Number 5 is in relation to a locally community-based engagement strategy in relation to the renewables industry, particularly to reflect opportunities for social and economic wellbeing. Number 6 is in relation to 10-year strategic asset management plan for Tasmanian Parks and Wildlife Service for all their customer-facing assets and infrastructure. We seem to be cycling from embellishment to decline, Spine Cop Road being a classic example. If we had a 10-year asset management plan for their customer-facing assets, we would be in a much better position to communicate around the priorities of things. Number 7 is in relation to the implementation of the state development policy to make Crown land available for all types of renewable energy projects. At this point in time, the state does not have a policy around that. And number 8 was for Legat to lobby on behalf of councils for improved mandated EPA transparency and community-facing participation and engagement in the processes that they undertake for development assessments and recommendations and approvals. Number 9 is in relation to significantly stronger penalties for malicious damage and vandalism to public facilities and infrastructure. Dare I say, that's one thing that is probably close to our hearts here in relation to the fact that recent events, considerable damage to community assets and value, but limited penalties apply. And the last one, number 10, in relation to the Legat lobbying the state government on behalf of all councils for inclusion of assistance animals in the Dog Control Act as they provide a community wellbeing service. They're not actually referenced, and it creates some frustration in relation to how council can assist people in that environment. The report is for the council's consideration, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. GM. Is somebody prepared to move the recommendations? Thanks. Councillor Bosky, Councillor Eddie. Is there any discussion on these? Are all things that we have discussed over a number of years, some of them?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment on the excellent work done for the submissions. All our points that we've been discussing have been covered. The work's put together in an excellent manner, and hopefully we'll be successful at the Legat meeting.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Aye. Against, carried. We now come to 7.2.
Deputy Mayor.
Okay, we'll move on to 7.2. Recommendation there. I think the gentleman who wants to speak to it.
Yes, Mr. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Also for the public's information, there was some additional information provided to the gallery tonight and online, I understand, Matthew? Yep. In relation to a couple of the components there of the report that was written pre-receiving some advice, Council has tabled the independent legal advice that's been made available to it, and in relation to a couple of the questions that were submitted in writing by Mr. West, we have chosen to action a couple of those. One, the first question in relation to his submission, we will need a little bit more time, and we'll put that on the agenda for the May meeting. But in relation to the provisions that are there in relation to those couple of extra questions, the information is tabled. I won't read through it, but I'm happy to receive any questions from the table.
Have you got any questions in a region? So does anyone want to move the recommendation?
Can I move, Mr. Deputy Mayor?
The seconder? Who wants to speak?
Yeah, well, Mr. Deputy Mayor, thank you. As noted, and as the report sits there, the notes are sitting there, I'd just like to refer particularly to point 5. I'm comfortable, and as our legal advice has shown us, we're in a position where we can be and could be, and have been, with no issues about that at all. But I do think we learn as we go forward, and I think it's important that we now move reasonably quickly to review a policy on any sale, be it public, council-owned, or of any land infrastructure, where we go through a better consultation and engagement process. I'm comfortable where we're at with this. There's none, past history, but moving forward, I think there's some stuff we can do that may be a little bit better. Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak? Information? I just want to thank the people that came along to the meeting last last week, the questions that were asked and the concerns they had, I think that was important for them to ask those questions. And we had to take some back and actually look at it. So we've done due diligence there. It has made us stop and think as council and councillors about our processes and how we can improve them. So I think it's good that that came about, and I thank them for that. But as far as this recommendation goes, I think it's a good one. So good outcome as far as making sure everything was right. So I'll put up the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
Yep.
Aye.
Carried. Mayor, come back, please.
We now go to item 8. 8.1 and 8.2 is nil. 8.3 is public questions without notice. Are there any questions without notice?
Yes.
Thank you.
Testing, 1, 2, testing.
Yeah.
Working. Hi, my name's Melissa Wells. I just have a question. Who was the qualified person who gave the council and the general manager the advice to remove the block on Grant Street from the public land list? Because the general manager is to ensure that all advice it receives is from a qualified representative in that particular field.
Through Mr Mayor, that was considered in Council's report in November 2019. The information was tabled there.
That doesn't answer my question. Who was the specific person that gave that?
The officers referenced in the report were the ones providing the recommendation to Council.
I don't have that information in front of me. Could you tell me who it is?
That would be Matthew, and there was a number of other staff involved in the preparation of that report off the top of my head.
So they were internal staff.
Mhm.
They weren't independent people from outside of the council.
Internal staff, yeah.
I also have a question now in regards to the Agritas lease. It states in here that, this is in the Agritas lease, that in December 2014, a lease was entered for property for grazing purposes at $0 rental. What date in December was that?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I'd have to take that question on notice and go and find a copy of the lease. I don't have it in front of me.
Right, so because then in March 2019, they are requesting for a variation of the lease due to the redevelopment of the grazing to support the robotic dairy, why would they be requesting a variation of the lease in March 2019 if the lease was entered into in 2014,
Through you, Mr Deputy
in the
Mayor.
December?
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, the circumstances in terms of whether a person could request a variation or not is dependent upon the contents of the lease and or the circumstances that the person finds themselves in. We have multiple requests for variation, even council itself requests variations with funding bodies depending on the circumstances of projects and programs. But I'm more than happy to take that question.
Yeah, the point I'm sort of trying to make is that was it still being leased, because it's only a 5-year period, and it says again in April 2020, so like 2014 to 2026 years, so was it?
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, I would take that on notice because
Yeah.
some leases run on unless they're altered, some have a clean determination date.
Right. I'll allow someone else to ask a question. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee.
James West. I am referring to the part after question 3 regarding the post appearing on Facebook 13th of October 2020. Now, gentlemen, how many people would have noticed this sort of post on Facebook? And it also states that the council is only going to be considering that proposed sale of the land. It doesn't state that it was already going ahead to be sold. Now, the interesting part, the meeting was held on the 15th of October. When was the land sold, or the contract entered into? 19th of October. Thank you very much. Now, that to me does not give anyone here or anywhere else as an interested party.
Is there a question?
Just a minute, I'll get there.
Yes, there.
To be able to even express an interest in buying the land. Now, I'm sorry, that to me sounds like insider trading or some other business.
That's a
Thank you.
statement. We need a question. So, what's the question?
Well, that's my question.
It's not a
Where was the land advertised so the general public knew about the sale? Nowhere.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. Brad Hodgson. I attended the meeting on last week. I'd like to thank the council for being there and answering some hard questions, and I acknowledge what Mr. Blizzard has said in regards to taking on board what occurred. However, I've read this report from Rain Partners. Now, their report states, however, from the information provided, it seems it could be strongly argued by council that the 178 of the Local Government Act does not apply. It doesn't give any definite definition that it does, and it also states here that the Local Government Act is silent on the removal of land from the public register. Now that means it doesn't give any permission. Now also it says that the information of the meeting on the 21st of November 2019, the land was purchased for future recreational use. That was never forthcoming. Totally and utterly incorrect. That land was purchased under the section of the Local Government Act that states.
So, what's... Sorry,
No,
I just asked what the question is, but you get the background
I'll
part.
get to the
Yeah, thank you.
I've got to give this information out to clarify the question. The land is also listed under section 177AE that states any land shown on a subdivision as public open space acquired by council under the Local Government Act Building Miscellaneous Provisions 1993 is public land. The land at Gant Street is recorded on the 2006 list as being purchased under this section of the Act in 1978. That is clearly recorded in 2006 that it was purchased that. So it complies with the Act of being a park, an open space, which is what it is zoned at by council and recorded on the 2006 list clearly as open space park, and also clearly that it was purchased under the Building Miscellaneous Provisions 1993. So how and what authority can council claim that this land does not meet the requirements of the Local Government Act 177A? It clearly meets two, and if the lease that the GM cannot provide the answer to, the new lease begins prior to the 21st of November 2019, that land was leased as public land. Public land that is leased always remains public land. You cannot change it while it is under a lease. So my question is quite clear. What advice has the council received from a qualified person before taking this action?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, in relation to the correspondence that you've referenced in your question,
Which doesn't define anything, clearly.
through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I beg to differ. In relation to the provisions in the advice, you will clearly note that the correspondence states that council has the authority to deal with its land in relation to section 25, if I can find it correctly in the letter, 25A of the Local Government Act allows it to extend its power to acquire hold, dispose, or otherwise deal with property.
Can that apply to public land or only just general?
That applies to all council property.
Does not apply to public land or incorrect, you should read the legislation.
I beg to differ based
You
upon the
can
advice
read
that
the
I have
legislation
received.
and confirm that, because that does not apply to public land. Council cannot dispose of public land unless they abide by the extra legislative requirements clearly pointed out by Matthew Saywood in that meeting that applies to public lands. That is clearly pointed out. Matthew mentions it out in that meeting on the 21st of November 2019. He states that quite clearly in front of all the councillors, and it is quite clear that he understands that is required to sell public land. So that 20 does not even apply. My question still remains is, when this land applies to not only one, but two sections of the Local Government Act of Section 1778, what gives the council the right to remove this land from? Not only one, but two, it's clearly purchased as public land under that Building Miscellaneous Provision Act, 1978 was done, and yet you still remove it without nothing. There's not anything there in that report from Race that states that you have the right. Could the council please give us a qualified advice on this matter?
Previous Deputy Mayor, I've made my point in relation to the advice that council received.
Any further questions?
This one. My question is, does the council or does the main roads department have control of the road?
What's your name, sorry?
Sorry, Sarah Sanford. The road outside the abattoir, who's responsible for the maintenance of the crossing between the road and the gate?
The road and the gate?
Yes.
Well, it's, that is government land, that's state government
Okay.
land, and
Does the council have sway with the government to actually concrete that section? Because at the moment, they just fill it in with stones, and it's slowly creeping up onto the tarmac. In winter, when you get a lot of rain, those dimples in the road become holes.
Yeah, that is a bad bit of road.
It's been going on for the 2 years I've been here, it's getting worse. All they do is throw stones on it and that's it.
We have spoken to Greenham's about that, and I know that they.
So Greenham's probably say it's the government's responsibility, it's the catch-22.
And I know that they have spoken to the government about it, but we probably ought to have a talk to the government as well now ourselves, so we can do that.
And my next question is to do with Greenham's lovely smell of boiling fat. We are now in 2021. I understand that there is technology to remove odours from processes that cause offence in discharging those odours into the atmosphere. You could basically say between the abattoir and the potato factory, this is a council, this is a circular head smell department, depending upon which way the wind goes. Is a technology which could especially go to Greenham's where they can remove the odour from boiling fat?
I don't know that answer to that question. I know that the odour is nothing like as bad as it used to be, but it is still.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm new to the area and I find it a bit offensive, and just down the road is the biggest tourist campsite we have. So I think something maybe pertinent into sort of investigating
Well,
that.
we could talk to the Greenhams about it.
Do I or do you guys?
We can.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Any further questions?
I've got one more. Now, this one concerns the sale price of the property. The premium list report states that the property is valued at $210,000. That's top price, $190 medium price, and $170.5 bottom price.
why did the council make the decision to list this property at the lowest possible sale price? Why not, when you've got a price on the thing of 210, list this property at 240, negotiate a sale and come down? Why go for the bottom lowest price when you list this property?
Have we got the answers to that question apart from what was in the actual report?
Through Mr Deputy Mayor, no.
Take it on notice.
Thank you.
Any further questions? You've had two.
Yep, am I not allowed to ask another?
We've got, and then towards the end of the meeting, we've got another, you can ask another two if you like.
I just have one question.
One more, I'll allow one.
So I'm just going to refer to the Ray and Partners legal advice you've got, Grant Street, Smith and Public Land Advice. Down at the bottom, like down there, if anyone wants to see where I'm pointing at, down at the bottom there, it says, it must be considered as to whether the public at large would agree with council that the land no longer or ever fit the parameters of section 177A of the LGAT. It could be argued that the land is still considered public land because of any of the descriptors therein, save except for 177A 1F, which is a council discretion rather than a set descriptor. There would be indeed an issue with the procedure undertaken. So that's out of your legal advice. So don't you think that me spending 3 or 4 months on this, standing up the main street with a petition, getting 295 signatures, having a public meeting with 21 people attend, and again, all these people, or some of these people attending tonight in regards to the fact that we don't think that you've done the right thing, that the public at large would disagree with the council in regards to it being not public land. That's in your legal advice.
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, I understand reading that clause in isolation reads as it does, but in terms of the overall context of the letter, I would refer you to the earlier statements that were made based upon the advice and information that was given to Ray and Partners in respect of the question that was asked.
So can we have a copy of what you give them? Because quite obviously you didn't give them everything.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to provide a copy of the report that was in November 2019 that was forwarded to Ray and Partners.
Well, it says, so you're saying then that you think that the community at large agrees with your decision as a council to sell that property?
No, in relation to
Well, it says it must be considered as to whether the public at large would agree. It must be considered. It's not saying it's a fact or a point or an item. It must be considered. So would you please consider, General Manager, does the community at large agree with this?
That's why we had that recommendation tonight.
And yous are stating that you think that the community in large agrees with what you've done?
No, in regard to what the information we got was acceptable, so that's what we had to go on.
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, the recommendation that was before council in relation to the report that was presented clearly indicates, as you have raised, there is some discontent in relation to the community's approach. The dynamics around that is that council has taken on board to actually review its processes in relation to...
But it's just tough luck about the Grant Street thing. You'll just do better in future. Just have to forget about what you did with Grant Street and just hope that you do better in future.
No, I don't accept that in relation to the advice. The advice gives us the opportunity to actually review that, but it clearly states that the information that we provided, as I've shared with you in relation to the report that was provided, was the one of 2019. That report has resulted in the advice that we've been given. The council's accepted that we could improve our processes, and the recommendations been made on that basis.
So you're saying that you won't do things like that in the future, you'll do them different?
Council will review its processes.
I'm just trying to understand what you're saying to me, using all these big words. I'm just so like in the future you won't do it like that again, you will do it differently?
In the future, we're going to look at it as a council and come up with a better solution, that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
Trying to better the process so we get a better outcome in the future.
But what happened in the past is just done now, so we just have to move on, yeah?
Well, we've got their recommendation as far as where they got to, so we've got to move on now.
All right, now I've got some written questions here that I've been given. I, Rod Hardy, have requested Ms Wells to ask 2 questions on my behalf, which under the Act is permissible, as I am personally unable to do so. Question 1. When a property at property ID 1786607.
Can't do that.
It doesn't allow us to have questions from somebody else. You have to be here.
Can she
first.
submit that to you on that gentleman's behalf?
You can leave it with us so that we can
Take it
put it,
Thank you
we can
very
put it in
much.
next month's meeting.
So I can't read it out.
No.
Just submit it to the
Just
council
leave
and
it
they
with
will
us
take it.
and we'll take it on notice, but we.
Same as what James did with the other one.
I'm happy to receive it.
Sure you don't want to check the Legislative Act about that first?
I'm happy with that.
Thank you.
Because I was told by Rod, who is an ex-councillor, that the Legislative Act, because he is disabled and he's unwell, that I wouldn't be able to ask them questions on his behalf.
You can present it to us and we'll get an answer back to him.
Matthew, is that correct?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. People can make written questions to council 7 days before the meeting, and they will be tabled in the meeting and discussed and held. So if they need to be in writing, they need to.
So is there a clause in the Act where someone who's disabled, unwell and can't make it can have somebody else ask a question on their behalf?
I refer back to the Mayor as the chair of the meeting. He will accept 2 questions from members of the public.
So is there something in the Act about it?
You've already given 3 questions, so you can't.
They're not mine, they're Rod Hardy's.
Yeah, but they're from you, so.
We'll accept the questions and we'll get back to him on that and.
So there's nothing in the Legislative Act that states that someone who is unwell or unable to attend the meeting can ask somebody else to ask them questions on their behalf?
I'm unaware of it.
No one wants to have a quick look at the Act?
Through you, Mr Mayor, there is multiple mechanisms for community to submit questions in writing, and you've seen council's actions tonight in relation to accepting those that were submitted in writing and being addressed. We've given advice that we will take on notice these, and they will definitely be in the next meeting agenda.
Well, I did drive over to Stanley to collect them personally today off Rob that he wrote up himself, and I did tell him that I would ask them this evening. And he informed me that you would try and shut me down, you would try and shut me up, and I should just persist. But, I'm sorry, Rod, I tried my best.
Any further questions?
Yeah, this is irrelevant to today. I would like to ask council a question as to who administers the tourist roads like the Tarkane Drive. Now, roughly this time last year, we took some visitors to have a look at the lovely scenery. Lo and behold, we get a certain way down, a tree across the road. We try to turn around, we've got a Amarok ute, it's quite difficult to turn around. We tried to pull the tree out of the way, too heavy to pull that was lodged. No signage, no advice anywhere that there were trees down. And now, who is responsible for patrolling that area? Is it
State government.
Parks and Wildlife, Police, or who? Because,
There's parts of it Parks and Wildlife and some of it is
well,
forestry.
would council like to mention to Parks and Wildlife that if there's bad weather, someone should go out there before somebody gets killed?
Yeah. Parts of it is Parks and Wildlife and parts of it is.
Because there was no advice whatsoever about trees down or anything.
Hopefully there's no trees across it tonight, I won't let you know.
Any further questions?
Malcolm Stokes from Forest. With everything that's happened across government over the last couple of months and reviewing how council performed, has the council ever done gender equality training, or would you consider doing gender equality training?
Whatever goes.
Through you, Mr Mayor, in relation to gender equality training, I can honestly say our staff are working in a modern context. I'm quite confident that they are capable of delivering an appropriate service to all genders within our community. But specifically, from my own recollections, I don't think elected members have participated in that training, but I'm more than happy to take it on notice and have council consider that.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions? If not, we'll move on. Up to 9, notice of motion, 9.1 and 9.2 is nil. Item 10, we are now entering in as a planning authority. And a one tonight, which is One Montague Road. Thank you. Oh, yes.
Very Mr. Mayor, we have one development application for consideration tonight. Multiple use style development on 1 Montague Road for a shop front, multiple dwellings being 4 apartments, and then also a studio apartment that is located behind the retail component of the proposal. We've had one representation received on this application from the adjoining landowner, citing general amenity concerns with regards to the development next door. Council has assessed the proposal and recommends refusal on this instance for 2 particular reasons. One is for amenity and potential for overlooking of the adjoining dwelling to the west. It is acknowledged that if a permit were to be provided, that could be resolved with a condition requiring screening of the windows along that side of the development. The second part of the refusal is down to car parking. With regards to the multiple uses, the only car parking on site is for 4 single garages for each of the apartments. No parking provision has been made for the retail/business component or the studio apartment associated with that. There's also no on-street parking on the same side of Montague Road as the proposal, which would then require anybody visiting the site to essentially do a U-turn on Montague Road and park on the opposite side of the street where there is on-street parking. This would then also provide a safety issue with regards to those U-turns, and then an increase in people walking across or going across Montague Road. Based on these considerations, it's recommended for refusal due to insufficient parking on site.
Thank you. There is an alternative motion not on the table, but you want to talk those? Councillor Alday.
Mr. Mayor, I rise to move the alternative motion in accordance with section 51 and 57 of the Land Use Planning Approvals Act 93. Circulated into planning and screening 2013 permit will be granted for the shop front multiple dwelling, an apartment 4 and a studio 1 on Montague Road, Smithton, subject to the following conditions. There is 14 conditions on this, and there is some notes. One I don't propose to read them out, but they are substantial conditions of there. This is, Mr. Mayor, a development we're all singing out for housing. As part of this, we've got
Just need to get
I'll
that.
second that.
Give me a second.
we're all singing out for housing. Mr. Mayor, here's an opportunity for this to proceed and call on the council to support it.
Thank you. You want to say something about it? Any speakers for or against?
Yeah, I'd certainly support the recommendation. But just, if I may, Mr. Mayor, ask a question to Ashley. I noticed in the report that Richard Kerr, the traffic and civil.
I presume that Councillor Woodward has raised to support this recommendation. He just said to support the recommendation. They would just need to just clear that up.
Yeah, it's the one that is being moved.
Certainly, I thought.
I just needed to clear that up.
That's all right. Yeah, I'd certainly, I support the recommendation, but,
That's the motion, motion not recommendation.
yeah, the motion, yeah. Forget where I was at there. Just a question I would like to ask, with the, traffic, side of it. Richard Burke, a traffic and civil engineer, over 33 years of experience. Do you take that on board as a good recommendation from someone that's had that experience?
On the matters that they raised within the report, yes, but they didn't address all matters pertaining to the development. It was also with regards to site distances and access and egress to the property rather than the car parking numbers and where the car parking is situated.
Thank you.
Anything further, councillors? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
That's it.
Yeah, thanks.
We now have 11.1, draft mobile food vendor policy.
Bear with me as I scroll through. Should be able to speak off the cuff of this one. This is a draft policy seeking consent from council to move to community consultation. We've workshopped this matter, received some feedback from the councillors, some amendments that were made as per those comments. Seeking consent to go to council. I know probably in today's advocate, there's a write-up on a mobile food vendor looking to service the northwest, so this is a real opportune time to be considering this policy, and we'd probably be seeking specific advice from those new vendors on this policy, making them aware of our policy that's out for draft and seek their consultation. So it's a good opportunity to strike while the iron is hot.
Thank you.
Move the recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Plosky. Second, Deputy Mayor. Want to speak to it?
Only that hopefully the public will pick this up and make any comments back to council before we go for the real deal policy.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
I just want to say, I hope that people get the feedback that we need. I think that's the biggest problem, because a lot of the time we put these policies out and we ask for, put a draft out so people can put their input into it. They don't, and then they complain afterwards. So I hope they do due diligence and actually look at the policy. Actually reply to it and give us some information back.
Thank you. Councillor Oldo.
Mr. Mayor, the importance of this is that we make all other food outlets all have to have certain requirements to be able to sell food. This, in my opinion, is no different to anything else, and therefore we need to take this out to the public so that everybody clearly understands that you're all operating on the same, basically the same sort of licence in providing food. Because if something happens in one of these, it's not, it causes a problem. It causes a problem for everybody. But everybody needs to understand that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
I was going to say, where will people be able to access the policy, Mr. Chairman? Where will
Through Mr. Mayor, no doubt Ashley and the team will make it available on their website. There'll be some social media promotion around it, and we'll be sort of connecting wherever we can, providing the information out.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just add to that?
Yep.
And kind of what I was trying to say before, we're probably emailing it to anybody who's had an inquiry on mobile food vending in the past, whether that be for or against. Do a search of our emails and make sure those who are interested or shown interest in the past are targeted in our approach.
Okay, I'll put the motion. Was anybody against it? Nobody against it, that is carried. We now go on to 12.1, financial reports.
This one too.
I let this one do it. I did too. Ezra. Point two.
So moved.
So, yep, thank you. Seconded, I've got a mover and a seconder. Does anybody want to speak to this? It's a pretty big report.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in there.
Mr Mayor, I just briefly turn our attention to page 346. In the PESRAC report, there's a recommendation on housing. Within that, there's a Tasmanian housing strategy. I think it's essential time to be talking about it, land availability, population growth and the like. It's happening in our municipality and everyone else's throughout the state. So I commend the report and hopefully it gets some traction.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Councillor Rattler.
Yeah, I too found it to be quite a positive report, which as a central reference point for state government at the moment, I think that there's some really good aspects in it. I just wanted to, there's 5 main themes of the report. The first 2 main themes being economy and jobs, and we have plans to support the second one being skills needed. However, I believe our own strategic plan could benefit from more emphasis on the final 3 strong themes. We've seen tonight a discussion about digital inclusion, and the last 2 being community engagement and the standalone point of tackling mental health at a community level. Could they be implemented better in our own strategic plan? Does the council have more of a role to play in some of those aspects than we have previously? This PESRAC report, I believe, can inform our own strategic plan in a better way on those final 3 things.
Any further speakers? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. We'll try again, Rachel.
Thanks, Mr Mayor
Thank you.
and councillors. Before you, we have the financial reports for the period ending 31st March 2021. On to page 462 in the written form. We've received no applications for first-time owners grants for the year, with 22 in total, which is a pleasing number. The comprehensive income statement, we currently have a surplus from operating activities of 1.9 million compared to a budget loss of 1.18 million. As said last month, we've done some forecasting to bring that 1.1 million significantly back to this current financial year. We currently have 227.3 million in community assets in that amount, and 9.1 million in investments at the moment. In terms of proportion of rates uncollected, we currently have 3.31% compared to 4.67% for the same time last year, which is pleasing as well. And we have the bank reconciliation with the cash position of 14.5 million as at the end of March. Just on the side note too, we have our planning meeting set up for Monday with the auditors, so we're round to interim audit time again. So that'll happen on site in the next month or so, with the 30th of June statements due again by the 15th of August, the 14th of August, as in every other year. So with that, Mr Mayor, I'll present the report for Council's consideration.
Thank you. Somebody prepared to move the recommendation. Thanks, Councillor. Seconded. Deputy Mayor, is there any questions for a start on the report?
I probably answered this question before, but always interested to know that there's outstanding rates, but is there rates that people are really struggling, what do you call it?
Financial difficulty.
Yeah.
Repayments? Repayments, like on a repayment plan, or?
Yeah, is that getting less, or is it getting more and more from each one year to the next?
I'd have to take, through you, Mr Mayor, Council, we would have to take that on notice to actually look at the figures, but anecdotally through discussions with the rates officer, the ones on repayments would be getting more.
Right.
So we have, because we've been, I suppose, in the last 10 years, much more approachable, but more willing to discuss and help people out in that space and get regular payments coming in instead of waiting and then going through a collection agency and things like that. So we've been doing that much more. So and there's a lot of people that actually come in before the due date as well nowadays, which is really good, and they don't get a penalty. So yeah, so that's the thing. If you come in and you go on a repayment arrangement, then we don't put a penalty on it because you've committed to a repayment plan. So
Because the last resource would be collection payments, and that probably a bit hard, isn't it?
yeah, well, the last one is sale of land, so that's or sale of the property. The one back from before that is collection agency.
Okay.
So
Yep. No, thank you.
Just a quick one, Mr Mayor, to Rachel. I did note, and it's great to see the figure of 22 first home screens. Just a question on that. How long has council been doing that for?
through Mr Mayor, it's been 10 years at least.
It's been a long time.
And
I think it's 207.
Yeah.
the council of the day, it's probably going to depth, but they seen that policy. They seen that as something that was essential for first homeowners, or to help them out.
Yeah, so that's been through 2 or 3 policy reviews with elected members since that was originally adopted. I think even a couple of years ago, there was the council wanted to put it out there more, so we did a little bit more advertising and things like that on it to encourage. I suppose in today's market, it gets a little bit harder for first-time buyers, and it was the council's way of encouraging that through. And it's not the money back in your pocket; it's actually money off your rates. So it's not just a cash advance. Yeah, so it was council's way of helping contribute to people purchasing their first home.
Yeah, which is very important. I just thought I'd touch briefly on it in the fact that, yeah, I suppose the core of why it was set up was exactly what you just said, Rachel, and whether we felt a sense of obligation, particularly in this, I suppose, agricultural land we live in, whether first farm buyers or owners had an opportunity to.
It was any property owner, so it didn't matter whether you were commercial, industrial, whatever. If that was your first property, I think from council, I think so. I'd have to actually go back and check that. But actually, no, it's not, because it's a residential one. You have to live in it for a period of time. Yeah, I'm just thinking of property owner, but it's not. It's actually residential.
If we had opportunity in the next 6 workshops to table it for half an hour, it'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Just to talk a bit more in depth about it. Thank you.
Okay, anything further? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Aye. Against, carried. We'll go to 12.2, senior management report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Senior management report presented for council's consideration. You'll note some notes there in relation to Healthy Tasmanian. International Women's Day was held on the 8th of March with over 50 people in attendance, which was a great outcome. In terms of mental health, there's some notes there in relation to AU Bogmate and the cause suicide prevention training. Also, Harmony Day has been rescheduled to early in May, and also some notes there in relation to 10 days on the island. Youth activities have been strong, from Know Your Odds through the Chill program, Youth Week and 7up. Emergency management, there's been some advice there in relation to additional GP clinics. Also in relation to the tourism, there's a number of notes in relation to social media, Arthur River Cruises, Tourism Tasmania, and visitor numbers. And it's pleasing to see that, dare I say, one of the core markets for the local region, particularly Victoria, is actually rebounding quite strongly, which is good. And Tasmanians, the home game players, are not far behind the third rank, which is Queensland, which is not normally the experience that we have. So I think that's a good outcome in terms of our region promoting itself across the state. In relation to engineering and project management, we've received an extension there in relation to the infrastructure grants. In terms of the correspondence attached, we've got the Western Area Management Committee down until Town Hall. Sorry, too far. Happy to receive any questions.
Just a couple of things on there. The on your bike sessions, unfortunately, nobody took that up, which was disappointing. I thought that some parents might have taken their kids to get some lessons so that they learn how to ride their bikes safely, rather than the way that we used to. Scull and knees and go up. But a bit disappointing about that, but anyway, that we have tried. The RU Bob Mate workshop, I know a lot of people were at that, and I think that was a really good night, where a lot of people attended, and it's one of the best ones attended out of all of them together, so that was great. And the course suicide prevention training was fully booked, which was great. And again, Curtis talked about mental illness, and so it's really good that a lot of people see the need to get trained for the course, which is a really good program. And the last one, the Harmony Day, we had a meeting with the PLU guy a couple of days ago, and that's happening on the 21st of May at 4:30, which is a Friday. And they promised that they're going to get all their guys to come, and we hope that a number of other people come as well. So anybody that can come Friday afternoon at the rec centre on the 21st of May. Is there anything else on there that anyone wants to mention at all?
Just a quick question about the minutes of the committees.
We'll do that shortly.
Oh, it's not part of that one, sorry.
My apologies.
Somebody prepared to move?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I just found a little bit on the first one, I agree, if you want to do it as part of the senior management report.
Oh, yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
The policy there states that council will support first home owners in the initial period of owning their first residence by providing financial assistance through a one-off credit to the rates account. So if that was subservient to that and had a residence attached to it, then it could be.
Just for the residents though?
Yeah, no, well, it's $750 per
Oh,
property, so it's a farm with a house or
Yeah.
a commercial property with a house. then
Thanks
that
for
would-
that.
So if it was a farm and you had a house on it, you was going to live in it, you'd still get it.
But you can't,
A couple of questions.
can't
Yeah,
have owned,
but you can't.
No, you can't have owned it.
you can't have owned another property.
No, just younger people have bought farms, and I thought,
Yeah,
yeah, like with 22, whether that included them or
Yep,
not. but
That could have if they lived in the house.
Yeah, no, it's just good.
Councillor Blizzard, you got to,
Close it to the move the motion.
thank you.
And I'll second that.
Thanks, Councillor Kay. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Number 13, which is the three committees, and then we'll go through them individually. Somebody prepared to move those? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Edlin. I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. And we'll go on to Western Area Management Committee. Any questions on that at all?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I've got a question. I can take point one in business arising. Some time ago, firstly I'll state, I'm not against the new fire station. We need the requirements to serve that large area of the western area with the right facilities and right training. Put that on the record that it's not against that. What I will take note on and what's been raised with some bureaucrats suggesting the infrastructure should be independent. That's what I've raised previously, and I believe that is the case because we have not received their 10-year plan yet as one. Two, we lose the flexibility if we ever
decide to dispose of that hall or part thereof, the land out there, and to reconnect it to the building, which we haven't seen any plans or any discussion on about the plans, I know they're making plans, raises the same concerns that the bureaucrats have raised there. Yes, let's put a really good facility there for that important area, but I believe the council may be short-sighted in attaching it to the hall because we lose flexibility. Everything's okey-dokey at the moment. Sell one, then put two roosters in the one building doesn't work. So that's my concern also, and I hope the council will discuss this further later on.
Okay, anything further? Nothing further. We'll go to the Stanley Town Hall. Any questions, debate? Question? Yeah, nothing. If not, we'll go down to Circular Recreation Advisory meeting notes of, we went to Marymore. We checked out all the facilities and had a talk to the group there. There's a couple of things there that I know Deb's is following up what was asked of us at that meeting. Nothing on that?
Mr. Mayor, in the minutes there, but to discuss this, to seek your approval, Councillor Harris perhaps needs to be out of the room when we're dealing with this rubbish one, because he is the groundkeeper down there. And I'll bring that to the attention. It's not trying to go to anything, so I think this discussion, what I'd have to say, you probably need to be out of the room.
You have a discussion, yeah?
Well, I want to raise this matter next stage. If that's okay with you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mr. Mayor, the rubbish down at Green Point had become an issue. I took the opportunity, the meeting before I was an apology, this last minutes that are here, because there was something else on with it and I couldn't be in two places. The issue about the rubbish was raised. I took the opportunity to raise with the manager of Works Plus, it's not called Works Plus, whatever that is
Works
now,
and Services.
Works and Services, about, it was in between we go once a fortnight, it's that other week, when the peak load is on the rubbish down there, and they were going to pick it up on the Friday and bring it back to the depot, is my understanding of what he said to me. You might want to have that discussion with him about that. But it's only when that peak period is on, from here on, it won't really be an issue, right? But it's when, you know, that Christmas period, and there was people, and that's probably been since, because on the Saturday of Easter, I went with my wife and grandson. We went for a drive down around there and annoyed the bloke at Red Bar too, but that's another story. We went down to Green Point. There was people everywhere. How long someone would have been camped there, I couldn't tell you. But there has been reported some have been staying there too long. That's an issue that perhaps needs to be addressed. But the rubbish one, that's where it had been. And when I seen that come up, that rubbish was still an issue, I thought, somebody hasn't sort of followed something here, but I'm not trying to put Darren under a bus, but that's why I had to have Councillor Five Sarah's out there, because he's the groundsman down there. You know, I'm not going to try and put him under the bus either, but that's what's been happening in that peak period.
They told us while we were down there, and Councillor isn't correct me if I'm wrong, but that the issue is still that a lot of even the local people are filling those rubbish bins up as soon as they put out there, and it's not always the campers or the people staying there, it's actually local people that are taking some rubbish there, and some are. And so they were more looking at ways of being able to not lift it up as high to be able to throw
Big bag.
rubbish bags in there and they weren't really sure, but they're frustrated because.
Only one fence post is an issue.
Yeah,
Yeah, someone said you can, yeah.
yeah, and so the issue is not entirely with Darren or Councillor Harris or anybody else, it's more with the local people that are filling these bins up and they are changing them around as much as they can. And they, I think, from whatever Stuart did tell us, that probably hadn't worked that well. But a couple of times the staff did bring some bins back, but not all the time. So it is an issue, but they're still working on it, as I understand it.
How many,
Mr. Mayor, can I suggest that we workshop considering a trial of a period of no wheelie bins being put there, and let's trial and see what happens. Because it's going to be an issue, whatever you've got a rubbish bin there, that same happened with the South River, they brought in no trace, and fixed the problem, or put it in Marrawar's problem. We've never trialled not having wheelie bins there. I'd like to discuss it at a workshop.
Well, we could discuss it at a workshop. I'm not sure we're going to get with it, but it is a problem, there's no doubt about that. That's how I understood it. That was right, Councillor?
Yes, yeah, they were certainly frustrated.
Nothing else to add after that?
I was frustrated and they were limiting what I was putting out because of that reason.
Yeah, I think they had about a dozen bins down there and they put out half a dozen at a time, if I remember correctly, and
That's how they do it.
yeah. All right, I think we can get.
Thank you for that.
What's your fault?
He wouldn't go, he's only young for it, you're right.
He's probably like his friends with his new
I stayed there for half an hour. He wouldn't,
You know,
They've opened now.
he wouldn't go and pick it.
no,
Yeah.
really, I think,
Oh,
no, not this one.
We lost Woody now.
yeah.
Is that what you're
He
doing?
kept going, isn't it?
Okay, so that's that. So we come down to the last lot of public questions. Are there any questions? You're right.
I have one.
You have
I
one.
won't take up much of your time.
I'll just say that a minute. Before we move on. Just can you try and grab the check minutes before every agenda, because Councillor Morski asked and we were 2 months behind. Just want to make sure that they come in every time. That's all.
I'm Isaac Posse. Just wondering what the go is with the carpet plant in the Stanley Cemetery. Had someone ask about it and they reckon that it was priced a couple of years ago but nothing ever happened. Just wondering if there's any plans to remove those at any stage.
What was the question?
Remove the what?
The carpet plant at the Stanley Cemetery, on good account, it's damaging the graves that are there and apparently it was priced to have them removed.
Yeah. No, I'd have to. I think we'd need to check those out. I don't know whether Matthew. No, we would need to check that out. No, I think it was talked about once because the roots was getting under there and cracking the cement.
Yeah, I vaguely recall
But
that.
that's a fair while ago.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. No, I don't know.
I think I was still in school. I think it was quite some time ago. But I
Yes, I
think,
reckon
yeah.
it'd be a short page.
Certainly happy to take that on.
Yeah, we'll take it on notice. Thank
No
you.
worries, thank you very much.
Okay, I now need a motion to council resolve absolute majority of the matters listed below be considered by Councillor Rowley, Councillor Harris. Put the motion, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried, and then 15.2. Somebody prepared to make that?
And I'll second.
Councillor Blizzard, Councillor Kane, I'll put the motion, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. We'll go into closed meeting when we get rid of